Now, let's turn our attention to something a little less windy and a little more, well, let's just say a little less pleasant to think about initially. The plumbing of ancient Rome. I know, it doesn't sound exactly like a bedtime story, does it? But bear with me, because the surprisingly sophisticated plumbing of ancient Rome is actually quite fascinating and surprisingly calming once you get past the initial you factor. Imagine a city teeming with over 1 million people, all needing places to, well, you know. And not just anywhere, but somewhere that wouldn't turn their city into a giant, fetid swamp. This was the challenge facing the Roman engineers, and frankly, they rose to it in a way that's both impressive and, let's be honest, a little bit gross. We often picture ancient Rome with its magnificent aqueducts, those impressive feats of engineering that brought fresh water from miles away. And those aqueducts were indeed crucial, providing a constant flow of water for drinking, public fountains, and, of course, the baths. But the story doesn't end there. The water coming into the city also had to go somewhere, and the Romans didn't simply let it run back out to sea, creating a rather stinky situation. Oh no, they had a plan, a remarkably advanced plan for the time, involving a system so extensive it's hard to imagine. This wasn't just a matter of digging a few ditches and hoping for the best. Roman engineers designed and constructed incredibly complex sewer systems, networks of channels, and pipes that extended throughout the city. Think of it as a massive, ancient, underground circulatory system for waste, transporting it efficiently away from homes and public spaces. This wasn't your garden variety drainage system. We're talking about a meticulously planned infrastructure designed to handle the waste of an entire metropolis. Now, the materials they used were rustic, shall we say? Much of the system was constructed from terracotta pipes, carefully fitted together to form an extensive network. These pipes weren't uniform, mind you. They varied in size depending on their purpose, some carrying rainwater, others carrying, well, let's just call it effluent for the sake of our peaceful slumber. And they weren't just buried haphazardly. They were laid out according to a carefully planned design, incorporating inclines and gradients to ensure the smooth flow of waste. They understood the simple principles of gravity and used them masterfully. Picture this, the sound of water gently flowing through those terracotta pipes, a constant, almost meditative hum beneath the bustling streets of Rome. A quiet, subterranean symphony of waste disposal. Of course, the aroma likely wasn't quite as soothing. But from an engineering perspective, it's awe-inspiring how effectively they addressed a problem that plagues cities even today. Their public baths, too, were marvels of hydraulic engineering. These weren't simply places to wash. They were social hubs, centers of community life. And behind the scenes, an intricate system of water supply and drainage was at work, meticulously regulating the flow of hot and cold water, ensuring the baths remained clean and functioning. We often think about the elegance of the mosaics and the grandeur of the architecture, but the engineering genius that kept these places functional was just as significant. You know, there's something oddly comforting about considering the scale of such a project. Thousands of workers, generations of engineers, all contributing to this immense, subterranean network that served the city for centuries. It's a testament to human ingenuity, a demonstration of how even the most seemingly mundane aspects of daily life can be approached with such extraordinary skill and ambition. The Romans, it seems, didn't just build empires. They also built remarkably sophisticated sanitation systems. And while the specifics might not be the most pleasant subject matter for a bedtime story, reflecting on their problem-solving prowess and engineering skills is a strangely relaxing way to drift off to sleep. So, as you settle in for the night, imagine those terracotta pipes, gently carrying away the day's worries, just as they did for the citizens of ancient Rome. Sweet dreams. Now, let's delve into a story so wonderfully strange, so unexpectedly hilarious. It's practically a bedtime comedy sketch about a humble spud. We're talking about the potato, my friends, a vegetable so ubiquitous now, so deeply ingrained in our culinary landscape, that it's almost impossible to imagine a world without it. But believe me, there was such a time A time when the potato wasn't just unheard of, it was actively feared. A time when this now-beloved tuber was seen as, well, poisonous. Imagine, if you will, the 16th century. Europe is abuzz with explorers returning from the New World, bringing back tales of strange lands and stranger fruits and vegetables. Among these novelties was the potato, originally hailing from the Andes Mountains of South America, where it had been a staple food for thousands of years. But the Europeans? They were hesitant. The potato, you see, looked rather unassuming. It wasn't a shiny, glamorous fruit like a mango or a pomegranate. It grew underground, a somewhat muddy and unappealing bulb. Its skin wasn't brightly colored, and it didn't offer up its deliciousness immediately. It required some cooking. And to those unfamiliar with the culinary arts of potato preparation, this was clearly suspicious behavior. Why was it hiding in the dirt? Why did it need to be cooked before it tasted any good? This was clearly a plot against the monarchy, a plot to poison the king. Probably. Seriously, though, the initial European reaction to the potato was a mixture of suspicion, disgust, and frankly, a touch of bewilderment. Some thought it was downright dangerous, believing it to harbor strange, unseen toxins that would, at the very least, cause unfortunate stomach upsets and, at the very worst, lead to untimely demise. This wasn't entirely unfounded. Certain varieties of uncooked potatoes do indeed contain solanine, a glycoalkaloid that can cause illness. So, there was a kernel of truth to their worries, even if it was grossly exaggerated by their general unfamiliarity with the proper preparation of the thing. The potato's introduction into Europe was a bit like trying to introduce a new, slightly weird pet to a room full of cats. A whole lot of hissing and cautiously raised paws. In some places, it was forbidden outright. In others, it was viewed with a mixture of cautious curiosity and outright terror. It was described as something from the devil's kitchen, a strange and vaguely unpleasant gift from the mysterious New World. I can just imagine the conversations. Have you seen this thing? It's all knobbly and brown. We should burn it. To be safe. Yet, despite the initial widespread fear and lack of culinary understanding, the potato slowly, gradually started to creep its way into people's hearts and stomachs. Necessity, as they say, is the mother of invention, and in times of famine, people were more than willing to try just about anything. Gradually, people began to realize that this weird, earthy-tasting thing actually filled their stomachs, helped stave off hunger, and prevented starvation. It was a slow climb from demon vegetable to dinner staple. It took generations for the potato to overcome its initial bad reputation and become a universally appreciated food source. One by one, farmers and families overcame their initial apprehension and discovered the simple joy of a well-boiled, mashed, or roasted potato. The surprisingly versatile nature of the potato allowed it to adapt to different cultures and cuisines, taking on a multitude of forms depending on the region, the season, and the whim of the cook. From the simple baked potato to the crispy French fry, the creamy mashed potato to the hearty potato stew, the humble spud has evolved into a global culinary phenomenon, a staple food across continents and cultures. The once feared, poisonous alien vegetable became a symbol of comfort, sustenance, and, let's face it, deliciousness. And it all started with a little bit of fear, a lot of skepticism, and the enduring human need to fill our bellies. So next time you enjoy a potato in any of its many forms, take a moment to appreciate its surprisingly hilarious journey from suspected poison to beloved staple. A truly remarkable tale for a humble root vegetable. Now, close your eyes and let the soothing comfort of that potato's unlikely journey lull you into a peaceful slumber. Good night. Now, let's drift away from the breezy comfort of Persian wind towers and journey to a slightly chillier, though equally fascinating, realm, the medieval cathedrals of Europe. Imagine, if you will, a time before power tools, before cranes that could lift entire stone blocks effortlessly, before even the understanding of germ theory. Building a cathedral in the Middle Ages was less about architectural blueprints and more about a centuries-long, slightly chaotic, and surprisingly human undertaking. Think of it, These magnificent structures, soaring towards the heavens, weren't simply erected, they grew. One generation would lay the foundations, perhaps using techniques passed down through generations of stonemasons, techniques honed over centuries, like a particularly elaborate family recipe. Then, another generation would build upon their work, adding a section of the nave, perhaps, or starting on those intricate flying buttresses that seemed to defy gravity itself. And these weren't just nameless, faceless laborers. Each stone, each carefully carved detail, was touched by human hands, hands that likely held calluses from years of painstaking work, hands that may have been stained with lime, and maybe even the occasional bit of ale spilled during a midday break. We like to imagine these medieval builders as grim, silent monks toiling away in somber silence. But the reality was probably a bit more colorful. Historians have unearthed evidence suggesting that building sites were bustling hubs of activity, a sort of medieval construction boomtown. There were skilled masons, of course, the architects of stone, but also carpenters, plasterers, glaziers, a whole community dedicated to the construction of these monumental works of art. And like any community, they had their disagreements, their rivalries, and their moments of sheer, unadulterated joy when a particularly difficult section was finally completed. Imagine the challenges. Transportation alone must have been a logistical nightmare. How did they move those colossal blocks of stone, some weighing many tons, from quarries sometimes miles away? There's evidence suggesting ingenious systems of rollers, levers, and sheer manpower, teams of men, and perhaps even oxen, painstakingly inching those stones along. A truly impressive feat of medieval engineering. And the tools. Think hammers, chisels, and saws. Not the precision instruments we have today, but tools nonetheless capable of creating incredible works of art, testament to the skill and determination of the builders. Now, let's talk about the workers themselves. We tend to focus on the grand vision, the architectural achievements, but let's not forget the people who made it all possible. These weren't always paid handsomely. Their wages would vary wildly depending on the project's funding, the availability of work, and the general prosperity of the region. Think about the constant risk of injury, a misplaced step, a falling stone, a poorly secured scaffold, and bam, a broken bone, a lifetime of pain. Yet they continued, building not just churches, but also a community around their work, sharing their skills and their laughter amongst the dust and the sweat. Interestingly, building sites were often hubs of social activity. Records reveal evidence of guilds, providing a sense of camaraderie and mutual support amongst the workers. These organizations protected their members' interests, set standards for workmanship, and even provided social support in times of hardship. You can almost picture these groups gathered after a day's labor, enjoying a hearty meal and sharing stories around a crackling fire, perhaps even spinning tall tales about the mischievous gargoyles they were carving. The construction of a medieval cathedral wasn't a race against time. It was a marathon, often spanning generations. It involved a confluence of human skills, determination, and a bit of good luck. The cathedrals stand today not only as monuments to the glory of God, but also as testament to the ingenuity, dedication, and yes, even the quirky lives of the ordinary men and women who built them, stone by painstaking stone, over centuries of tireless effort. So tonight, as you drift off to sleep, imagine the echoes of their hammers, the songs they sang, and the slow, steady progress of those monumental projects. Good night, and sweet dreams. Now, let's drift away from the gentle breezes of Persia and into something, well, a little less breezy. Something rather more kinetic. We're going to Strasbourg in the year 1518. Picture it, cobblestone streets, the scent of baking bread mingling with the aroma of, well, perhaps not so pleasant things, given the lack of sanitation back then. And in the heart of this bustling medieval city, something utterly bizarre began to unfold. Something so peculiar, so inexplicable, it's practically begging to be included in a bedtime history show. We're talking about the dancing plague of 1518. Yes, you heard that right. A plague of dancing. Not a plague causing dancing. Mind you, but an outbreak of uncontrollable, relentless dancing. It all started with a single woman. We don't know her name, sadly, just that she began to dance in the street, inexplicably, relentlessly. It wasn't a joyful jig, mind you. Historians describe it as frantic, exhausting, and seemingly unstoppable. She danced and danced, and danced some more, until exhaustion finally claimed her. But here's where things get truly strange. Instead of this being a singular event, a curious anomaly swiftly dismissed, this woman's dance became contagious. Within days, dozens of people joined her, seemingly struck by the same compulsion to dance, day and night, without rest. Some say the music started spontaneously, perhaps the rhythm took hold in the collective psyche. Others suggest it was the heat of that particular summer which loosened inhibitions. Whatever the cause, by the end of a month, it was said that over 300 people were caught in the grip of this peculiar ailment, filling the streets of Strasbourg with a whirling, exhausting, and utterly bizarre dance marathon. Imagine the scene. Hundreds of people, their faces contorted in a mixture of exhaustion, pain, and possibly a touch of bewildered amusement, twirling and leaping in the city's public spaces. The rhythmic tapping of their feet on cobblestones would have been a relentless soundtrack, a strange, morbid waltz accompanying the daily life of a bewildered city. Picture the look on the faces of the townsfolk watching their neighbors, their friends, their families slowly dance themselves to utter depletion. This wasn't just a bit of a jig. People danced until they collapsed from exhaustion, heart attacks, and strokes, ultimately resulting in several deaths. It wasn't a happy dance. It was a life-threatening affliction. And even stranger, this strange affliction seemingly had no cure. Doctors of the time, whose understanding of disease was, let's say, a little less advanced than our own, were completely baffled. They tried various treatments, some sensible, some rather more outlandish, but nothing seemed to work. Now, what caused this extraordinary event? This is where things get even more intriguing. There are many theories, of course. Some blame it on ergotism, a type of poisoning caused by eating infected rye bread. Ergotism has been known to cause hallucinations and convulsive movements. But did infected bread truly cause hundreds of people to dance nonstop? It seems a little far-fetched, doesn't it? Others suggest mass psychogenic illness, a condition where the symptoms of an illness spread through a population due to psychological factors, like stress or fear. Imagine the collective anxiety of a medieval city facing famine, disease, and the ever-present threat of war. Maybe this collective anxiety manifested in the most unusual of ways. Perhaps it was a combination of factors, a perfect storm of environmental stress, psychological vulnerability, and maybe, just maybe, a dash of medieval hysteria. The dancing plague of 1518 remains a historical mystery, a curious and slightly terrifying footnote in the annals of history, a story that feels equal parts unsettling and utterly captivating. It's a tale that reminds us that history isn't always neatly organized battles and triumphant monarchs. Sometimes it's just plain weird. And sometimes that weirdness is wonderfully, sleepily captivating. So, as you drift off to sleep, remember the dancing people of Strasbourg, their tireless feet echoing through the cobbled streets of 1518, a peculiar reminder that history can be just as baffling as it is fascinating. Sweet dreams. Now, let's drift away from the desert winds of Persia and travel to a very different kind of climate, the rather stuffy, yet surprisingly romantic, world of Victorian England. Imagine, if you will, a world without email, without instant messaging, without even the readily available telephone. Communication, my friends, was a far more deliberate and, frankly, more charming affair. We're talking, of course, about the art of letter writing in the Victorian era. Forget the quick, snappy text message. Victorian letters were a performance, a carefully crafted piece of writing that reflected not just the writer's thoughts, but their entire social standing and personality. Think of it as the ultimate form of personalized stationery, but with far higher stakes than just choosing the right font. The etiquette surrounding letter writing was, to put it mildly, extensive. There were rules for everything, from the type of paper used, thick, High-quality paper was a must, showing you valued the recipient's time and, of course, your own reputation. To the ink, the color could subtly indicate the level of formality, to the very placement of the address. Even the fold of the letter had unspoken implications. Getting it wrong could be socially disastrous, a bit like accidentally wearing mismatched socks to a royal garden party. It was all very, very precise. But despite this strict adherence to etiquette, Victorian letters often reveal a surprisingly personal and intimate side to their writers. While the formal flourishes were crucial, they didn't overshadow the genuine emotions that often poured out onto the page. These weren't just dry reports on the weather or the latest social scandal. They were vessels of longing, affection, frustration, joy, and even, dare I say it, a bit of gossip. Imagine the painstaking care taken. The careful selection of a quill pen, the dipping into the inkwell, a small, almost meditative act in itself. The deliberate choice of words, the considered phrasing, the elegant calligraphy that flowed across the page. It wasn't just about conveying information. It was about creating an aesthetic experience, a tangible representation of the writer's thoughts and feelings. One can almost smell the lavender-scented stationery, feel the crisp texture of the paper beneath one's fingers. These letters often went beyond mere words, becoming keepsakes, treasured objects passed down through generations. They were physical manifestations of relationships, testaments to friendships, loves, and family bonds. Let's consider the language itself. Victorian writers favored flowery prose, rich with metaphor and allusion. They weren't afraid of sentimentality. In fact, they often embraced it with gusto. Expressions of love were profuse and often delightfully over the top. A simple, "I love you," would be spun into an elaborate tapestry of poetic prose, each word chosen with painstaking care. But it wasn't all romantic declarations and flowery compliments. Letters also served as a means of venting frustrations, expressing anxieties, and sharing the mundane details of daily life. We find glimpses of the challenges faced by Victorian women, the struggles of the working class, and the anxieties surrounding social mobility. The letters become windows into the lives of ordinary people, revealing the complexities of their emotions and experiences. Think of a young woman writing to her fiancé stationed far away in India. Her words might begin with a polite inquiry about his health and the latest news from his regiment. But beneath the surface we would find a longing for his return, a sense of loneliness softened only by the hope that someday they would be reunited. Or imagine a mother writing to her son away at university, her words filled with both pride and concern, her gentle admonitions interspersed with warm reminders of home and family. Even the seemingly trivial details can be fascinating. The mention of a specific type of flower in a garden, the description of a new hat, the gossip about a neighbor, these seemingly insignificant details provide a rich tapestry of everyday life in the Victorian era. They're tiny snapshots, frozen moments in time, preserved in ink on paper, whispering to us across the centuries. And then there's the sheer volume of these letters. Think of the countless hours spent writing, reading, and carefully storing these missives. The vast network of correspondence that crisscrossed the country, connecting people across vast distances, building and sustaining relationships through the painstaking process of putting pen to paper. It's a testament to the human need for connection, the enduring power of communication, even in an age devoid of modern conveniences. So, as you drift off to sleep tonight, imagine the soft scratch of a quill pen, the gentle rustle of paper, and the quiet intimacy of a Victorian letter, filled with both formality and deep, heartfelt emotion. Sweet dreams. Now, let's drift off to a slightly more mysterious aspect of history, the history of sleepwalking. Imagine, if you will, a world without electric lights, where the only sounds are the crickets chirping and perhaps the occasional owl hooting. In this world, centuries ago, people experienced sleepwalking, just like we do today, but their understanding of it, well, that was a bit different. Ancient explanations of sleepwalking were, shall we say, colorful. The Greeks, those masters of philosophy and drama, attributed sleepwalking to the mischievous antics of the gods. Sometimes, they'd blame it on a visit from one of those playful, albeit slightly troublesome, spirits they believed roamed the night. Imagine a tiny, winged creature fluttering around your bedroom, giving you a gentle nudge to go for a nocturnal stroll. Perhaps it was Hermes, the messenger god, delivering a late-night message from Olympus, albeit a rather indirect one, leaving you to wander the house in a state of blissful unawareness. Other ancient cultures had equally intriguing theories. Some believed sleepwalkers were possessed by spirits, either good or evil, depending on the actions of the sleepwalker during their nocturnal wanderings. If they were simply wandering the house quietly, perhaps it was a benevolent spirit. But if they were acting in a disruptive manner, then that would certainly indicate a more malevolent presence, according to these ancient interpretations. A bit like a historical version of a ghost hunting show, but instead of catching ghosts on camera, they would simply witness the sleepwalker's actions as a reflection of spiritual forces at play. The Romans, those practical folk, might have had a slightly more grounded explanation, though still far from our modern scientific understanding. They often attributed sleepwalking to an imbalance of the four humors, a belief prevalent in their medicine. Remember, this was long before we understood things like neurotransmitters and brain waves. For them, sleepwalking was a physical manifestation of an internal imbalance, requiring the right herbal remedies or perhaps a good cleansing ritual to restore harmony. I can almost picture a Roman physician calmly prescribing a soothing herbal tea and a relaxing bath, perhaps with a touch of lavender, a rather relaxing remedy, even by today's standards. Now, let's fast forward through the centuries. As our understanding of the body and the mind grew, so too did our understanding of sleepwalking. The Middle Ages and the Renaissance saw sleepwalking mentioned in literature and folklore, often portrayed with a mixture of fear and fascination. Sleepwalkers were sometimes viewed with suspicion, sometimes with pity. The lack of proper understanding certainly led to a wide range of interpretations, some quite fantastical, and others quite simply superstitious. It wasn't until the Enlightenment and the rise of modern science that we started to get a clearer picture. Doctors began to observe sleepwalking more systematically, taking notes on its patterns and trying to understand its causes. Early explanations still lacked the sophistication we have today, but they laid the groundwork for future research. They started noticing patterns, looking for links between sleepwalking and other conditions, and slowly, ever so gradually, started to chip away at the mystery of this peculiar phenomenon. And then, finally, with the advent of modern neuroscience, things started to fall into place. We now understand that sleepwalking is often associated with certain sleep stages, particularly those involving slow-wave sleep. We've learned that it's linked to factors like genetics, stress, sleep deprivation, and even certain medical conditions. It's a far cry from the mischievous spirits and humoral imbalances of the ancients. It's fascinating, isn't it? To think that a phenomenon we observe today, something we might even experience ourselves or see in our children, has been interpreted in such wildly different ways throughout history. From the playful interference of gods to a complex interplay of brain activity and genetics, the story of sleepwalking is a testament to how our understanding of the world has evolved over time. And it's a reminder that even the most commonplace things can hold a wealth of intriguing history within them. So, as you drift off to sleep tonight, perhaps you'll think of those ancient Greeks blaming Hermes, or those Romans adjusting their humors. And maybe, just maybe, you'll appreciate even more the comfort of our modern scientific understanding, allowing you to sleep soundly, knowing that the next time you sleepwalk, there's probably nothing more sinister at play than a slightly confused brain. Sweet dreams. Now, let's drift back in time, further than the breezy wind towers of Persia, all the way to the land of pharaohs, pyramids, and surprisingly intricate wig-making. Yes, you heard that right. Ancient Egyptian wig-making wasn't just a simple case of slapping some hair on your head. Oh no, it was a whole industry, a complex social statement, and frankly, a bit of a logistical marvel considering the materials involved. Imagine a world without hair dryers, without shampoos, conditioners, or even readily available combs as we know them. Yet, the Egyptians, those masters of engineering and artistic expression, managed to create some truly spectacular headwear. We're not talking about simple, functional head coverings here. We're talking about elaborate, meticulously crafted works of art that signified wealth, status, and even religious devotion. The process itself was a fascinating blend of artistry and practicality. First, there was the selection of the hair. Human hair was the most common choice, often sourced from the heads of the recently deceased, which, admittedly, gives the whole thing a slightly unsettling vibe, doesn't it? But they also used animal hair, particularly that of the goat, and even plant fibers, like flax. Think about that for a moment. A wig made entirely or partially from goat hair. Rather cozy, perhaps, if a little unexpected. Then came the preparation. The hair, whether human or animal, would have been carefully cleaned and sorted by color and texture. Imagine the sheer volume of hair required for a truly impressive wig, and the meticulous work of separating the strands, removing any knots or imperfections. This was not a quick job. We're talking potentially weeks, maybe even months of painstaking preparation for a single, magnificent wig. Now, once the hair was ready, the weaving could begin. This wasn't your average hair braiding. We're talking about incredibly fine craftsmanship, with tiny strands interwoven to create a remarkably sturdy and seamless result. The Egyptians were masters of knotting techniques, creating structures that were both aesthetically pleasing and remarkably durable. And the styles. Oh, the styles. From simple, sleek bobs to elaborate, towering creations adorned with beads, gold leaf, and even semi-precious stones, the possibilities were seemingly endless. The size and complexity of a wig often reflected the wearer's social status. A simple, short wig might be worn by a commoner, while a pharaoh might sport a towering masterpiece that required a team of servants to maintain. Can you picture that? A team of wig stylists catering to the needs of the ruler of a vast empire. It's almost comical in its grandiosity, and gives us a glimpse into the importance placed on appearance in ancient Egyptian society. Think about the colors, too. We know from depictions in tomb paintings and the remarkably well-preserved wigs themselves that they used a variety of dyes to create stunning effects. Imagine the vibrant shades of black, red, and blonde that shimmered in the Egyptian sun. The dyes themselves were often sourced from natural ingredients, plants, minerals, even insects, making the coloration process a fascinating blend of chemistry and artistry. But it wasn't just about aesthetics. Wigs played a vital role in protecting the wearer's own hair from the harsh Egyptian sun and dust. In a society where cleanliness and hygiene were paramount, despite their rather unique hair sourcing methods, protecting one's own hair from the elements was a practical necessity. So, the wigs also served a protective function. They were an investment, a statement of status, a fashion statement, and a practical piece of headwear all rolled into one. Furthermore, wigs also held significant religious meaning. Certain hairstyles were associated with specific deities, reflecting the wearer's piety and connection to the divine. So, the choice of a wig wasn't just a matter of personal preference. It was a declaration of identity, social standing, and spiritual affiliation. As we drift off to sleep tonight, let the image of an ancient Egyptian craftsman painstakingly weaving a magnificent wig bring a gentle smile to your face. Think of the effort, the artistry, the social significance, and the frankly unusual origins of these captivating creations. The surprising world of ancient Egyptian wig-making reminds us that even the seemingly mundane aspects of everyday life can hold fascinating stories, stories that can transport us through time and invite us to appreciate the ingenuity and creativity of people who lived thousands of years ago. And with that thought, let the soft glow of the past lull you into a peaceful and restful sleep. Now, close your eyes and let's drift away to a time long past, a time often associated with horned helmets and furious raids, but also, surprisingly, a time of trade, exploration, and surprisingly peaceful moments. We're talking about the Vikings, those seafaring Norsemen who often get a rather bloodthirsty reputation. But the full Viking story, you see, is a bit more nuanced, a bit more, well, let's just say less consistently violent than popular culture might lead you to believe. Think of it this way. Imagine a bustling marketplace, not in some dusty medieval town, but on a windswept fjord, the air thick with the smells of salt and wood smoke. That's a pretty accurate picture of Viking life in many ways. While certainly known for their raiding expeditions, these weren't their only activities. In fact, trade was absolutely vital to Viking society. These weren't just brutal warriors. They were shrewd businessmen, navigating the waterways of Europe and beyond, exchanging goods and building connections with surprising sophistication. Consider their ships, those iconic longships. They weren't just fearsome warships. They were also incredibly versatile cargo vessels, capable of carrying vast quantities of goods across long distances. Imagine the creak of the timbers, the rhythmic splash of oars as a Viking longship, laden with furs, timber, slaves, sadly. Yes, but let's keep focusing on the more positive aspects tonight. Honey and amber glide silently towards a foreign port. This wasn't just about plunder. It was about creating a network of exchange, building relationships that could sometimes lead to surprising alliances. They were explorers, too, venturing far beyond the familiar shores of Scandinavia. Picture a Viking exploring the vast expanse of the North Atlantic, navigating by the stars and the currents, their sturdy ships braving stormy seas. They weren't just driven by conquest. Curiosity played a significant part in their voyages. Think of their journeys to Iceland, Greenland, and even, incredibly, North America, long before Columbus, driven by a blend of adventure, resource-seeking, and the sheer human desire to see what lies beyond the horizon. Now, let's be clear, violence was undoubtedly a part of Viking life. Raids happened, battles were fought, but to reduce their history to solely one of bloodshed is to miss a far richer and perhaps more interesting story. The Vikings established trading posts across Europe, influencing the political and economic landscapes of many regions. They were skilled craftsmen, creating intricate jewelry, beautiful tapestries, and powerful weapons. They developed advanced shipbuilding techniques and sophisticated navigational skills. And they weren't just raiders, they were also settlers, establishing farms and communities in new lands, forging new lives and cultures. Consider the Viking Age's impact on the development of European languages. Words like berserk, skull, and knife have Viking origins, quietly residing in modern English as a testament to their presence and influence. They even left their mark on the very landscape, their runic inscriptions still visible on ancient stones, whispering tales of their lives and beliefs. Now, we've often romanticized the Vikings. Those horned helmets are more Hollywood than historically accurate, for example. But there's something truly fascinating about imagining a society so adaptable and multifaceted. They were skilled negotiators, as well as fierce warriors, successful traders, as well as daring explorers. Their history is a reminder that people are complex, and societies are rarely defined by a single, simple trait. So, as you drift off to sleep tonight, imagine those Viking longships sailing silently across moonlit waters, not only as symbols of power and aggression, but also as symbols of exploration, trade, and the surprising complexity of a culture that continues to fascinate us even today. Think about the intricate designs of their jewelry, the sturdy construction of their longships, the echoes of their language in our own. And remember that even within the most fearsome reputations, there are always more stories to be discovered. Stories of ingenuity, exploration, and even a little bit of peaceful trade along the way. Sweet dreams. Now, imagine this. It's the year 1000. You're a rather important person, perhaps a lord or a lady, sitting down to a magnificent feast. Roasted meats, glistening vegetables, maybe even a rather exotic fruit or two, all laid out before you, ready to be devoured. But how do you, a person of great standing and impeccable taste, at least you hope so, actually eat all this deliciousness? With your fingers, of course. Yes, My friends, for centuries, the preferred method of tackling a meal was the good old-fashioned finger-first approach. Sounds a bit messy, doesn't it? Well, it was. And that, my sleepy listeners, is where our story of the humble fork begins, or rather, doesn't begin, for quite a while. Because the fork, that seemingly essential utensil of modern dining, was a surprisingly latecomer to the European table. While the idea of using something to pick up food wasn't exactly revolutionary. Think chopsticks in the East, for example. The fork as we know it, with its two prongs and elegant design, took its sweet time making its grand entrance. Now, you might think that something so simple would have been adopted immediately. After all, wouldn't anyone appreciate a less messy, more efficient way to eat? Well, not so fast. The fork's journey into European hearts and kitchens was anything but straightforward, more like a slow, somewhat awkward dance. It actually seems to have started in Byzantium, the Eastern Roman Empire, sometime around the 11th century. The Byzantines, ever so refined, were early adopters of this novel eating device. They might have seen it as a symbol of high status, a way to show off their sophistication, their distance from the messy business of eating with bare hands. Imagine the conversation. "Oh, you're eating with your hands? How rustic." It's a fascinating glimpse into the societal signaling we still engage in today through our dining habits. However, the fork's initial appearances in Europe were met with some, shall we say, resistance. Some people found the idea utterly preposterous. Why use a tiny, somewhat impractical-looking device when perfectly good fingers serve the purpose just fine? Others, particularly the more devout, saw the fork as an affront to God, an unnecessary intervention in a naturally ordained process of eating. The very act of spearing food was viewed by some as unnatural and even sinful. It was seen as a challenge to the divine order of things. It's not difficult to imagine the lively debates this must have sparked around the dinner table, or perhaps even in the cathedral. This utensil, this fork is an abomination. God intended us to eat with our hands, to connect with the food through the very essence of our being. One can practically hear the indignant gasps and the raised eyebrows. Naturally, there was also the practicality issue. The early forks were quite different from the ones we use today. They often had only two prongs, were somewhat blunt, and certainly weren't designed for the delicate art of expertly twirling spaghetti. So, there was a learning curve involved, and not everyone was keen on mastering a new technique, especially when the old one had served them well for generations. It was perhaps considered pretentious or, at the very least, inconvenient. The adoption of the fork was a gradual process, spreading slowly through the upper echelons of society before trickling down to the masses. It wasn't until the 17th and 18th centuries that the fork truly gained widespread acceptance in Europe. Even then, the transition wasn't a smooth one. There were persistent holdouts, people who staunchly refused to abandon the traditional finger-eating method, clinging to their old ways, perhaps with a touch of rebellious defiance. So, next time you effortlessly spear a piece of pasta or delicately lift a morsel of cake, take a moment to appreciate the fascinating and slightly absurd history of that seemingly ordinary utensil. Its journey from a somewhat controversial novelty to an indispensable part of our dining experience is a testament to the ever-changing nature of culinary customs and the often surprising obstacles faced by even the simplest inventions. And now, as the gentle sound of your breathing guides you towards slumber, remember this little slice of quirky history and let it lull you into a peaceful, restful night. Sweet dreams. Now, let's drift away from the breezy elegance of Persian wind towers and delve into something stickier, something surprisingly tragic and undeniably bizarre. We're going to Boston, Massachusetts, in the year 1919, for a tale involving a massive amount of molasses and a catastrophe that's both incredibly strange and strangely memorable. Get comfortable, because this is the story of the Great Molasses Flood. Imagine, if you will, a January day in Boston. It's cold, it's likely a bit dreary, and the air is crisp. Now, imagine that crisp air suddenly turning thick and sweet, a cloying wave of sticky, brown doom rushing towards you at an alarming speed. That, my friends, is a very simplified version of what happened on that fateful day. You see, the city of Boston, back then, had a rather significant molasses problem. Not a problem of not having enough molasses, mind you, but a problem of having way too much molasses. A massive tank, one of the largest in the world at the time, stood proudly, or perhaps ominously, in the North End. This colossal tank, owned by the Purity Distilling Company, held over 2 million gallons of molasses. 2 million gallons. That's enough molasses to fill an Olympic-sized swimming pool multiple times over. Enough to make a truly enormous gingerbread house. Or, as it turned out, enough to create a rather spectacular and devastating flood. Now, this wasn't just any old molasses. This was industrial-grade molasses, intended for the production of rum. Think of it as the less refined cousin of the molasses you might use in baking. Slightly darker, thicker, and probably with a more intense, almost overwhelming sweetness. And it was kept in this enormous tank, a steel behemoth that, quite frankly, probably wasn't built to the highest engineering standards. We're talking about a structure subjected to immense pressure from 2 million gallons of thick, fermenting liquid. Fermenting, by the way, is a key word here. As the molasses warmed in the unseasonably warm January weather, it expanded. It put a considerable strain on the tank, which, let's be honest, probably should have been reinforced a bit more. So, on that January afternoon, something gave way. Not with a bang, mind you, but with a rather ominous groan and a tearing sound. The tank ruptured, and what followed was not a gentle trickle, not a slow ooze, but a catastrophic wave of molasses, a sticky tsunami that surged through the streets of Boston's North End at an estimated speed of 35 miles per hour. 35 miles per hour. That's faster than most people can run. Imagine being caught in a wave of that sticky, thick liquid, being swept along, completely helpless. The molasses engulfed everything in its path. Buildings were crushed under its immense weight. Horses were knocked off their feet, and people were swept away, drowning in this unexpected and incredibly viscous tide. The air filled with the cloying smell of molasses, a sickeningly sweet aroma clinging to the disaster. The scene must have been utterly chaotic, a sticky brown maelstrom of destruction. The sound of the rushing molasses, the cries of terrified people, the groaning of buildings. It paints a vivid and disturbing picture. The aftermath was horrific. 21 people lost their lives in the Great Molasses Flood, and many more were injured, some severely. The molasses covered everything, coating buildings, cars, and even getting into people's homes. Cleanup was a monumental task, a sticky, lengthy process that took weeks, months even. The smell lingered for a considerable time, a constant reminder of the tragedy that had unfolded. The legal battles that followed were almost as fascinating as the disaster itself. Lawsuits were filed, accusations were made, and the Purity Distilling Company faced immense scrutiny. Ultimately, the company was found negligent, and they paid out considerable compensation to the victims and their families. The Great Molasses Flood of 1919 remains a bizarre footnote in history, a reminder that even the most mundane of substances can, under the right, or rather wrong, circumstances, cause unexpected and catastrophic damage. It's a story that blends tragedy with the absurd, a strangely sticky tale that's both fascinating and cautionary, a reminder to always appreciate the power of seemingly ordinary things. And as you drift off to sleep tonight, perhaps you'll think about that unexpected wave of molasses and the surprisingly sticky history of Boston. Sweet dreams. Now, let's drift away from the desert winds of Persia and into a much smaller, but equally fascinating world, the world of pocket watches. Imagine, if you will, a time before smartphones, before even wristwatches. A time when knowing the time wasn't just a matter of glancing at your wrist, but a rather more involved affair. That's where our little friends, the pocket watches, come in. The story of the pocket watch isn't one of a sudden invention, like a light bulb moment. Oh no, it's a much more meandering tale, full of curious twists and turns, almost as winding as the intricate gears inside these miniature time-telling marvels. It's a history that stretches back centuries, a history entwined with the evolution of both technology and social etiquette. Initially, these weren't your everyday, mass-produced timepieces. Early pocket watches, think late 15th and 16th centuries, were the epitome of luxury. Think ridiculously ornate cases, crafted from gold, silver, or even precious gemstones. They weren't simply tools to tell the time. They were status symbols, miniature works of art that spoke volumes about their owner's wealth and social standing. Imagine carrying around a tiny, glittering treasure chest, constantly reminding everyone of your prosperous position. It was the ultimate look-at-me accessory long before Instagram existed. The craftsmanship involved was astonishing. These weren't your standard, off-the-shelf contraptions. Each watch was a painstaking creation, a testament to the skill of master watchmakers. The intricate mechanisms, the delicate engravings, the flawless polishing, every detail spoke to the dedication and artistry involved. Owning one wasn't just about telling time. It was about owning a piece of meticulously crafted history. As time marched on, pun intended, the technology behind pocket watches improved. The mechanisms became more reliable, smaller, and more efficient. This, naturally, led to a decrease in cost, making them gradually more accessible to the broader population. However, even as they became less exclusive, they remained objects of some fascination. Think of the subtle click-clack of the watch chain, a gentle rhythmic sound accompanying their owner's every move. It was a comforting, familiar sound, a reminder of the passing of time in a world that was moving at a slower pace. The pocket watch played a crucial role in the changing social landscape. Suddenly, punctuality became far more important. Before their widespread use, appointments were often vague, loosely scheduled affairs. But the rise of the pocket watch, along with the increasing industrialization and urbanization, led to the introduction of standardized time and schedules. Train schedules, factory shifts. Everything was now dictated by the precise ticking of these small, pocket-sized devices. It was a huge shift from the more relaxed, agricultural lifestyle of the past. The pocket watch, though, wasn't simply a tool of efficiency. It was also a symbol of personal identity. Many watches were personalized, bearing engravings, monograms, or even small portraits of loved ones. These details transformed a simple timekeeping device into a cherished personal item, an extension of the wearer's identity. It's a bit like a personalized phone case today, but with a far more intricate and timeless feel. Now, while pocket watches might seem like relics of the past, their story is far from over. They continue to be collected, admired, and restored by enthusiasts around the world. The craftsmanship, history, and sheer elegance of these miniature time machines ensure that they will continue to fascinate us for generations to come. They're a testament to human ingenuity, a reminder of how far we've come in measuring and understanding time itself. And as you drift off to sleep tonight, perhaps you can picture yourself in a world without the constant glow of digital screens, gently feeling the smooth weight of a finely crafted pocket watch in your hand, listening to its calm, reassuring tick-tock, a silent reminder of all the moments that have led you here to this tranquil moment of rest. Good night. Now, close your eyes and imagine a world brimming with knowledge, a world where scrolls stretched as far as the eye could see, filled with the wisdom of generations. We often hear about the Library of Alexandria, that legendary repository of ancient learning, tragically lost to the sands of time. But you know, Alexandria wasn't alone. It was just the tip of the iceberg, a very impressive, very tragically lost iceberg, but still just the tip. The truth is, history is littered with the ghosts of lost libraries, silent witnesses to civilizations that rose and fell, leaving behind only whispers of their incredible collections. Think of it, vast repositories of knowledge, carefully curated over centuries, vanished without a trace. It's a bit like finding a half-eaten chocolate cake with only a single crumb remaining. Frustrating, tantalizing, and a little bit mysterious. These weren't just dusty rooms full of books. They were the beating hearts of their societies, the keepers of their collective memories. Let's wander down a slightly less well-trodden path, shall we? Forget for a moment the grandeur of Alexandria. Let's consider the lost library of Nineveh, the ancient capital of Assyria. Imagine the sheer volume of clay tablets, meticulously inscribed with cuneiform script, detailing everything from royal decrees and epic poems to astronomical observations and practical advice on growing the best watermelons. Now picture it all gone, swept away by the relentless march of history, leaving only fragments for archaeologists to painstakingly piece together like a gigantic, ancient jigsaw puzzle, where most of the pieces are missing. And then there's the case of the Royal Library of Pergamon in modern-day Turkey. This library wasn't just a repository of knowledge. It was a serious contender to Alexandria, a true rival. They were fiercely competitive, you see, these ancient librarians. A little like a library book war, but instead of overdue finds, they were vying for the most complete and impressive collections. Pergamon boasted a magnificent collection, attracting scholars from across the known world. The library's innovative architecture, with its tiered shelves, was a marvel of engineering. Until, sadly, it too was largely destroyed, mostly by war and neglect. The surviving fragments are, needless to say, highly prized today. Moving further east, we encounter another enigma, the lost library of the first Qin emperor in China. This was no ordinary library. It held the accumulated knowledge of a vast empire, meticulously compiled and carefully preserved. But the emperor, with a somewhat peculiar obsession with order, and maybe a little bit of paranoia, had it burned down. He apparently feared that the writings might undermine his absolute authority. Rather short-sighted, wouldn't you say? It's a bit like burning your cookbook because you don't want to use it, a little extreme, perhaps. The subsequent destruction, however, resulted in a significant loss of pre-imperial writings, leaving us with large gaps in our understanding of this crucial period in Chinese history. Then there are the countless monastic libraries, scattered across the vast landscapes of the Middle East and Asia. These libraries were havens of learning, preserving ancient texts and religious scriptures. Generations of monks meticulously copied and preserved these fragile scrolls, often under incredibly difficult circumstances. Many of these libraries were eventually lost to wars, invasions, or simply the ravages of time, leaving behind only the echoes of their once vibrant intellectual life. Think of it, all those hours of patient calligraphy, only to disappear, leaving us to wonder what secrets they held. And even beyond these major examples, countless smaller collections have vanished, leaving us with tantalizing hints of forgotten knowledge. Imagine local libraries, housed in temples or palaces, carefully safeguarding the history and traditions of specific communities. All gone, leaving only a few stray references or archaeological fragments to suggest what might have been. The sheer scale of the loss is almost impossible to comprehend. It's as if countless chapters were ripped from the great book of history, leaving huge holes in our understanding of the past. We can only imagine the wealth of knowledge that has been irretrievably lost, those stories, those insights, those forgotten ideas. So, as you drift off to sleep tonight, perhaps you can ponder the mystery of these lost libraries, a silent testament to the fleeting nature of human achievements and the enduring power of knowledge. Perhaps some of these lost fragments would have changed our world, or just amused us. We'll never know, will we? But isn't it a wonderful and rather comforting thought? Sleep well, and dream of rediscovering the lost libraries of the world. Now, let's drift away from the breezy comfort of Persian wind towers and journey to a rather different, and much cooler, climate, ancient China. Specifically, we're heading to the tomb of the first emperor of a unified China, Qin Shi Huang, and the most extraordinary project ever undertaken by a single, rather demanding, ruler, the terracotta army. Imagine, if you will, a vast, silent army of thousands upon thousands of clay soldiers, each one unique, each one meticulously crafted, standing guard for eternity. That's the terracotta army, a sight so spectacular, so unbelievably ambitious. It still boggles the mind even today. We're not talking about a few dozen soldiers here. Oh no, this was an undertaking of truly epic proportions. Estimates put the number of terracotta warriors, horses, and chariots at well over 8,000. And that's just the ones we've found so far. Who knows how many more still lie buried, patiently waiting to be unearthed. Think about the sheer scale of this project for a moment. The emperor, a man known for his rather forceful personality, decided he needed a bodyguard for the afterlife. Not just any bodyguard, mind you, but an entire army, complete with its own infantry, cavalry, archers, even charioteers with their horses. And not just a rough-and-ready bunch of clay figures either. These soldiers are incredibly detailed. Each figure has its own individual features, unique hairstyle, even different expressions. Some look stern and determined, ready for battle, while others appear more relaxed, almost pensive. It's as if each sculptor imbued their creation with a personality, a silent story waiting to be told. Now, picture the logistical nightmare of such a project. First, you need the clay. Tons and tons of it, carefully sourced, mixed, and prepared. Then, you need the workforce. Thousands of skilled artisans, sculptors, painters, and laborers, all working in coordination for possibly decades. We're talking about an army of workers itself. And how did they coordinate? Did they have a project manager? A detailed blueprint? We can only guess, but the sheer organizational skill involved is astounding. It's easy to imagine disagreements, arguments, maybe even the occasional clay-throwing incident among the sculptors. One can almost hear the supervisor yelling, "More glaze." And that helmet needs more detail. It's the afterlife, not a game of soldiers. The level of detail is astonishing. The soldiers are equipped with real weapons, meticulously crafted from bronze and wood. These aren't mere props. They were meant to be functional, even if only in the spirit world. We find evidence of intricate craftsmanship in the clothing, the armor, even the facial expressions. Some warriors have beards, carefully sculpted, with every individual strand seemingly accounted for. Others wear elaborate hats and headdresses, adorned with delicate details. And the horses, each one is a masterpiece of anatomical precision, captured in clay with remarkable accuracy. You can almost feel the power of the horses, the strength in their muscles, even the tension in their manes as they stand ready to charge. But the army is not just about soldiers and horses. There are also numerous chariots, with intricate carvings and detailing. These chariots were designed to be pulled by teams of horses, further showcasing the level of complexity and planning involved in this enormous project. And let's not forget the civilians and the officials found within the complex. They provide a glimpse into the wider world of the Qin dynasty, showcasing the lives and professions of those who served the emperor, both living and, in a sense, forever entombed with him. Imagine the years of toil, the dedication, the sheer stubborn commitment of these artisans, toiling away, perhaps under harsh conditions, to create this army of the dead. Did they understand the enormity of their task? Did they feel any sense of pride? Or were they simply following orders, working tirelessly to fulfill the eccentric demands of their emperor? It's a mystery, a silent testament to human capability and a strange reflection of the beliefs of an ancient civilization. They're a fascinating glimpse into a world far removed from our own, a world that valued order, obedience, and perhaps just a touch of extravagance in the afterlife. The terracotta army stands as a timeless monument, a silent guardian, and a deeply captivating enigma. And with that thought, let's gently drift off to sleep. Now let's take a little sip of history, shall we? Not literally, of course, unless you've got a nice chamomile tea warming beside you, which, by the way, is perfectly acceptable bedtime behavior. We're going to talk about teacups. Yes, teacups. Sounds a bit unassuming, doesn't it? Like a topic that would send even the most enthusiastic history buffs scurrying for the remote. But bear with me, because the humble teacup, my friends, has a surprisingly fascinating story to tell. A story that spans centuries, reflects shifting societal norms, and even offers a glimpse into the artistic sensibilities of different cultures. Imagine, if you will, a world without teacups. A world where tea, that beloved beverage, was consumed from, well, what? Large bowls, rough-hewn mugs? Perhaps even directly from the pot. A rather undignified affair, wouldn't you agree? Early forms of tea drinking, particularly in China, where tea originated, involved quite different vessels. Think sturdy bowls, sometimes with lids, perfect for sharing amongst a group. These were practical tools, focused on functionality over anything else. The aesthetic appeal? Well, let's just say it wasn't a priority. It was all about getting that delicious, warming liquid down your throat. But as tea's popularity spread across the globe, so too did the way people consumed it. The arrival of tea in Europe during the 17th century marked a turning point. Suddenly, the humble act of drinking tea wasn't just about quenching thirst or enjoying a warming brew. It was becoming a social ritual. And what better way to elevate a ritual than with a beautifully crafted vessel? Enter the teacup as we know it. Initially, these early European teacups were relatively simple affairs, echoing the practical style of their Chinese predecessors. However, as the 18th century dawned, things started to get interesting. The rise of porcelain manufacture, particularly in places like China and later Europe, allowed for a dramatic leap in both the quality and artistry of teacups. Suddenly, you weren't just holding a vessel, you were holding a tiny, delicate work of art. Think intricate floral patterns, delicate hand-painted scenes, elaborate gilded edges. These teacups became miniature canvases for artistic expression. They reflected the prevailing tastes of the era. The Rococo period, for instance, saw the creation of incredibly ornate and flamboyant teacups, brimming with swirling lines and playful asymmetry. These weren't just for drinking tea, they were status symbols, a testament to one's wealth and social standing. Imagine the hushed conversations, the delicate clinking of china, the subtle display of affluence in a beautifully appointed tea room. But the story doesn't end there. The evolution of the teacup continued, mirroring societal shifts and technological advances. The Victorian era saw a renewed interest in simpler, more elegant designs, moving away from the extravagant flamboyance of the preceding centuries. The rise of mass production in the 19th and 20th centuries led to a wider availability of teacups, making them accessible to a broader segment of the population. Interestingly, the size and shape of the teacup itself also underwent transformations. The dainty teacups of the earlier periods gradually gave way to larger, more robust designs, reflecting the changing habits of tea drinkers. Some argue that this shift is linked to a change in tea preparation techniques. The evolution of tea bags, for example, led to larger cups better suited to accommodate the infused leaves. Even the material of the teacups changed. While porcelain remained a dominant material, other options like earthenware and bone china emerged, each with its own unique aesthetic and practical qualities. Each evolution reflects a subtle shift in societal values and priorities. Think about it. From practical tools to exquisite works of art, the teacup has truly mirrored the changes in our world. And the story continues even today. Contemporary teacups range from minimalist designs to wildly creative and innovative forms. The humble teacup, once a simple vessel for a beloved beverage, has evolved into a rich tapestry of history, art, and culture. So, next time you lift a teacup to your lips, take a moment to appreciate its long and winding journey, a journey that reflects centuries of human creativity and changing social dynamics. It's a small object, yes, but it tells a surprisingly large and captivating story. Now, isn't that a wonderfully comforting thought to drift off to sleep with? Sweet dreams. Now, let's drift away from the desert winds of Persia and find ourselves in a much quieter, more contemplative place, the serene world of the Japanese tea ceremony. Imagine, if you will, a small, exquisitely crafted room, perhaps with tatami mats underfoot, the soft glow of a paper lantern casting gentle shadows. The air is hushed, filled only with the delicate scent of incense and the subtle whisper of silk. This isn't just a way to drink tea. It's a centuries-old ritual, a carefully choreographed dance of respect, mindfulness, and, yes, even a touch of delightful absurdity. The Japanese tea ceremony, or shinoyu, as it's known in Japanese, didn't spring fully formed from the head of some ancient tea master. Its evolution is a fascinating story in itself, spanning centuries and absorbing influences from Zen Buddhism, aristocratic courtly life, and even a bit of playful competitiveness. Early forms involved simply sharing tea amongst friends, a convivial affair, but as time went on, the ceremony grew increasingly formalized, developing a bewildering, but charmingly so, array of rules and customs. One of the most striking aspects of the ceremony is its emphasis on meticulous preparation. The utensils themselves, the chawan, tea bowl, the chashaku, tea scoop, the natsum, lacquer canister for tea, are often works of art, meticulously crafted and treated with the utmost reverence. Before a single leaf of matcha is whisked, the host performs a series of carefully considered actions, each with a precise meaning and purpose. This is not simply making tea, it's a form of meditative performance art. And the rules? Oh, the rules. They're plentiful and surprisingly specific. The way the host moves, the angle at which the bowl is presented, the precise manner in which the whisk is used, all are governed by centuries of tradition. There are even specific rules about how to approach the tea house itself, and how to enter and exit with grace and respect. You wouldn't want to accidentally step on the wrong tatami mat. That would be a terrible faux pas. There's a certain humor to this extreme formality, isn't there? Imagine the pressure. Get the angle of the bowl wrong, and you might offend your guest. Use the wrong kind of whisk, and you could be the subject of hushed whispers for weeks. It's a ritual that celebrates precision and attention to detail, a beautiful manifestation of the Japanese aesthetic appreciation for the subtle and the refined. But beyond the intricate etiquette, the tea ceremony is at its heart a spiritual practice. The act of preparing and sharing tea becomes a moment of connection, a pause in the relentless rhythm of daily life. The emphasis on mindfulness and respect extends to every aspect of the ceremony, creating a space for contemplation and quiet reflection. The silence, punctuated only by the gentle swish of the whisk, fosters a deep sense of peace and calm. The matcha itself plays a central role, of course. This finely powdered green tea, whisked into a frothy emulsion, is not just a beverage. It's considered a precious gift, offered with respect and appreciation. Each sip is savored, a moment of mindful awareness, a connection to the history and tradition embedded in this ancient ritual. It's not just the taste, but the experience, the atmosphere, the whole careful orchestration that makes it special. The beauty of the tea ceremony, however, lies not just in its rigidity, but also in its adaptability. While the core principles have remained consistent for centuries, variations exist depending on the season, the occasion, and the preferences of the host and guests. This means there's no single correct way to perform a tea ceremony, but there are plenty of incorrect ones to avoid. Think of it like a perfectly balanced equation. Rigorous rules create a framework for creativity. Within the structure of established customs, there is room for individual expression, a subtle dance between tradition and improvisation. This constant interplay gives the ceremony a dynamic quality, keeping it fresh and relevant even after hundreds of years. So, next time you're reaching for a cup of tea, spare a thought for the carefully considered movements, the whispered etiquette, and the deeply spiritual significance of the Japanese tea ceremony. It's a reminder that even the simplest acts can be elevated to an art form, a testament to the enduring power of tradition and a surprisingly calming journey into history. And now, let the gentle rhythm of the whisk lull you into a peaceful and restful sleep. So, we've journeyed together through time, across centuries and continents, witnessing moments of triumph and hardship, of innovation and change. Let the stories we've shared tonight gently settle within you, a quiet hum beneath the surface of your thoughts. As the day's light fades and darkness softly embraces the world, allow the weight of history to melt away. leaving only a sense of peace and wonder. Let the images and narratives drift like clouds across the quiet landscape of your mind, each one a soft reminder of the incredible tapestry of human experience. Breathe deeply, letting go of the day's concerns. May your sleep be deep and undisturbed, filled with gentle dreams and the quiet promise of a new dawn. Sleep well and pleasant dreams.